All right, well, welcome to this Survivor Circle to everybody watching. I'm Becky Perkins, Survivor Support Specialist with Zero Abuse Project, and I'm always pleased to welcome folks who visit our website and watch these recordings, but I'm especially excited today to welcome someone I deeply admire, Joseph Fazzary, who is the District Attorney from Schuyler County, New York. Um, so I am going to let you know a little bit about DA Joe, as I might call him, and then we'll get started. So Joseph Fazzary is the Schuyler County, New York District Attorney, a position he has held since 1998 when he was elected at the age of 29, so just a couple years ago. He has been reelected 6 times. Mr. Fazzary is responsible for prosecuting all criminal offenses committed in Schuyler County. He's tried numerous cases over his career, including homicides, sexual assaults, burglaries, arsons, larcenies. He's been assigned to numerous counties as a special prosecutor on several occasions. He writes and argues appeals in the appellate courts of New York State. He's a graduate of Syracuse University and the Syracuse University College of Law, and sits on the board of directors of the Southern Tier Law Enforcement Academy and is a former adjunct professor at Elmira College. He also regularly makes presentations to local schools on topics such as violence in relationships, sexting, bullying, and drug use. He's advocated for crime victims his entire career and is frequently asked to present on the topic of child sexual abuse. So I am so pleased to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks for asking me to be on. This is a great honor, and thank you for everything that you guys do. The Zero Abuse Project is fantastic and in every way. So very, very pleased to have been asked to talk to you today.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess to get started, just maybe talk a little bit about how you got started in your career. What made you want to become an attorney?
So it's actually kind of strange because I have a daughter who's 23 years old, and she still doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. I was one of the lucky ones. I knew by the time I was in 5th grade that I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't really know why I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't really know what a lawyer did, but I knew that my father had wanted to be a lawyer and he never did it. And I thought I should try that because maybe it'll make him feel good that even though he didn't do it, his son did it. So and then as the older I got, the more it just was confirmed in my mind that I was going to be a lawyer, and it didn't matter where I went to law school, it didn't matter where I went to undergrad. It was just at some point I was going to be a lawyer. Now I should tell you, it was not that I was going to be a prosecutor. That never entered into the equation until honestly I married my well, we weren't married at the time, but when I graduated from law school, my childhood sweetheart, she wanted to stay in Schuyler County, which is beautiful. Watkins Glen is the home base on the southern tip of Seneca Lake, one of the Finger Lakes, and she wanted to stay here closer to her family and wanted to raise a family here. And I said, you know what, I can do that. So I went to the DA's office and I applied for a job. I was given the job that day. I hadn't even passed the bar exam yet, but the county was willing to bring me on as sort of an intern. And you know what? I loved it. I mean, that was the bottom line. I loved going to court. I loved standing up for victims. I loved to have that voice. So I mean, it was an easy fit for me. I mean, it just was who I was.
Amazing. That's awesome. To be able to figure out what you're meant to do so early on is great. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, so I admire you for knowing early on. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so I took the job in 1992, And by 1997, the district attorney had decided he was going to run for a Schuyler County Court judge. And I was very, very young. Actually, I was actually the youngest elected DA in the history of the state of New York at the age of 29. But, I just knew, I'm like, I have to keep doing this. And I have to be the voice for these victims and for the women and children that couldn't stand up for themselves and in a courtroom. And I gotta have some responsibility for taking these bad people off the street that are doing this to these children. And it wasn't just sexual assault. It was domestic violence. It was robbery and homicide and all of that. I just really believed in myself and my ability to stand up and argue on behalf of those people that don't get to talk in the courtroom.
Awesome. I'm so grateful that you were able to do that. So for folks who may not understand the work of a district attorney, or maybe their only knowledge is like law and order,
Right.
Talk a little bit about like what's involved with being a district attorney. Like, what are some of the duties of your job?
So I'll cut out the boring stuff. Okay. I mean, I'm an administrator of an office, so I'm like a manager of a business. I have 8 employees that work for me, from paralegals to secretaries to victims advocates to assistant district attorneys. So I have to manage the office, and I have to budget for it and all of that stuff. That's the boring stuff. I oversee the day-to-day operations, although I think my paralegal might disagree with me because I think she thinks she does it. And by the way, she's been with me for my entire 27 years that I've been the district attorney. So we were both very young when we started, and she definitely runs the show here. But for my job, it's changed over the years because our office has grown in size. It used to be that I handled every single felony case. I handled all the serious cases. I did all the felony trials, the serious trials. And as I was more comfortable with my chief assistant, who was growing into the position, he then began taking over some of the legwork with the felony cases, and we started splitting it. I would have more time to do some of the administrative things. And now I have 4 other lawyers that work here. That's more than I've ever had. And, I really delegate a lot. But for the most part, when I was trying all the cases, it was a case would come in, we would investigate it thoroughly, decide whether there was enough evidence to go to grand jury. We would take the case to grand jury, which is kind of like a mini trial without the defense side of it. So it's a mini presentation of evidence to see if there's enough evidence to charge a person. So we would go through a process of presenting, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 cases to grand jury. We were only doing it probably once every 3 or 4 weeks, but the caseload has grown so significantly over the years, and so now we're doing it once a month, and also I've become the special prosecutor for all these other counties. I mean, right now I'm a special prosecutor in Steuben County on 3 cases, Yates County, which is to our north, on 1 case, Allegheny County, which is an hour and a half away. I'm doing 1 case there, and I have 3 or 4 in Chemung County, which is to our south. And so I've become this prosecutor who steps in and takes cases where another DA has a conflict. But it's very difficult to prosecute a case, but because there's a lot that goes into it. But we will present the case to a grand jury, and then we have to do all the formal discovery that goes through with each case, and then we have to do motions and motion responses. And then we have to prepare it for trial if we can't work it out as in a plea bargain. And trial preparation. If you think that you work a lot of hours, you don't until you've tried to prepare for a trial. I mean, there are weeks where we work 80 plus hours, and then go home for just a few hours and come back, and it's like you're here all day long, and you're bouncing ideas off of everybody in the office, and then the trial comes, and it can last I think the longest one that I've ever had was about 4 weeks, and I had two little kids at home, and so to do a trial, and you have to basically say, I mean, I did, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a bad homicide trial, and I said goodbye to my kids on I think it happened in April of 2012, and it ended in May of 2013. And I basically worked on that case all day, every day for the whole entire year. And I would meet my wife and my children out for dinner on Monday nights. That was our big thing. So there's just so much that goes into it, and then it's not over when it's over. Even after the jury says guilty and a judge says you're going to jail for life, it's not over. Then you have the appeal. Then you have the appeal of the appeal, and then after that they can file a 440 motion, and I have one now that's a 2002 murder conviction, where the defense has now come in and said, well, she was subjected to domestic violence. We want her sentence reduced. I mean, 23 years later. So I won't take a homicide case and put it in storage, because we just keep working on them. And the sex assault cases are the same way. And it's those people that get sentenced to very harsh sentences that appeal and appeal and appeal, because what else do they have to do? They're sitting in a jail cell forever. And so it's just a very, very difficult, tedious process, but you get used to doing it, and it just becomes second nature. And I most of the people in my office say, you could walk into a trial, get the file the day before, walk into a trial and do everything that we could do if we prepared for it for several weeks. And there are better trial lawyers out there than me, but I think I'm actually a pretty good one.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, all that time spent away from your family, but in service of justice. So hopefully it felt like it was a good sacrifice of family time.
It's always been a good sacrifice. I don't know if they would say that, but
Yeah,
I would say
I'm
it.
sure. I'm sure. Yeah. So in addition to being a district attorney and just very accomplished in your legal career, just sort of what brings us together in survivor space is you are also a survivor of child sexual abuse. Um, so share just a little bit, whatever you're comfortable sharing, about what your experience has been as a survivor.
Sure. This is very difficult for me. It's gotten better. Um, I'll talk about in a little bit about disclosing for the first time, but since I did that, I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to do more, and that's why I'm on here today. And this is how we met, because I reached out to you and said I want to help more. And so I just the short story behind it is that I was just a little kid. I mean, I don't remember exactly. I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old when it first happened. And my parents had these friends that lived literally 3 or 4 blocks from our house, and they went there all the time. And they had an older boy. I mean, I was a very underdeveloped boy, even through high school, and he was a very overdeveloped boy. And I can't tell you how it really came to happen. I remember that he wanted to play a card game, and I remember my brother and my sister being there too. They don't ever recall it. They don't ever talk about it. But I remember him wanting to play a card game, and I remember that my parents were downstairs laughing and giggling and eating and drinking, and they were playing cards. And I thought, this can't be bad. And I look at it now and I say, okay, it was strip poker, and I just happened to lose because I had all of my clothes off and nobody else did. And I think that was the intention. It was very strange that he chose me, didn't choose my sister, didn't choose my brother. I mean, honestly, I'm glad that it was me. I would hate myself if it was them. So I didn't, obviously I didn't want it to happen to anybody, but if it had to happen to anyone, I'm glad that it was me, because I think that I was the one that could be able to survive it. So it went on for the better part of 8 years. It ended when I was 15, and he graduated from high school. And I think a lot of people look at it and say, okay, well, we get it when it happened when you were 7 or 8, until we'll give you until 11 or 12. But what about 13, 14, and 15? You were an active part of it. I didn't. I can't say I didn't know. I knew it was wrong. I certainly was never going to tell anybody that it had happened, but it just became what we did. I mean, I don't know how to explain it in any other way than you just do something for so long, it just happens. And people say, how many times did it happen? My response is every time. I mean, every single time. And my I've talked at length about my parents and how they didn't see what was happening. And I don't have an answer. um, I, I'm to this day, I've never even talked to my father about this. I have my mother, and I asked her, I said, how could you let this happen? And she said, we didn't know. We didn't think that boys did this to other boys. And as a parent, I sit here now and I think they were right. Nobody thought like that. I mean, this was in the '70s and '80s, before this really came to light that men were raping boys, and adults were raping children, and boys were doing it to boys. So it just was something that nobody really understood. And why should she think? Now I look at it and say, I don't know. I feel like I was gone for hours. Why didn't you check on me? Why when I was, taking a shower and or a bath and I was all red down there, why didn't you just say what is happening? And I don't blame her. I truly believe that she didn't understand. And my father, people say a lot, you say talk a lot about your mother. And I'm like, yeah, my mother was the one who I was close with as a kid. She was supposed to protect me. And so, it went on and on, hundreds of times. I mean, I literally can't tell you what or when. And what I can tell you is today that where it happened is 2 blocks away from my office. I drive by it twice every day, at least. And it's very, very difficult for me. And we'll talk about some other things as we go forward. But I can say, one of the things is you never really heal. And some days, I don't look up there. I don't, I never, I would never ever think about staring at that house and remembering what was happening. But I have, oddly enough, found myself on occasions driving there, and I can't even explain it, but it's like anger. And he doesn't live there, but his family still lives there. But he doesn't live there, but it's like this anger just comes through from time to time. I'm like, I need to drive by there. I need to do it. And it's just one of those things that is really, really awful for me. And I can't explain it. So, but I can tell you that I wasn't one of those people that thought about this later on and said, oh my God, I think I was sexually assaulted. I knew from the time I was 12 years old that this was bad. And I had just put it in my mind that I was bad. This was all my fault. And it took me a long time to get beyond that. Even after I had disclosed, it took me a long time to get beyond that. But I truly felt like I was bad. And I was asked one time, would you have, if your mother had asked you, would you have told her the truth? And my response was, absolutely not. I wouldn't, because in my mind, I grew up in this very, very Catholic family. And, the guilt associated with the church and the guilt that came from my parents. And I was that good kid. I was the good student. I was the honor student. I was involved in sports and athletics and all of that stuff. And the answer was simple. I never would have told her if she had asked me, because I knew it was bad and I thought I was bad. And that's just such an overwhelming, horrible feeling. And, as I sit here today as an adult and I see these kids and I know that that's what they feel, it breaks my heart, because I know as an adult, it took me forever to figure out that it wasn't my fault and it was done to me, not by me. And that's one of my goals when I go through those types of cases. And I handle a lot of child sexual assault cases because it's so near and dear to my heart. But I want those kids. It doesn't have to be a kid. It can be an adult male that it happened to. It could be a person that's an adult male now and it happened to them as a child. It can be a woman that it happened to. And my goal when I walk away is not necessarily that I get a conviction or justice or anything like that, but I want that person to understand that it wasn't their fault. And so, really, really, really a difficult thing for me. And honestly, there hasn't really been a day in my life since that stopped that I haven't thought about what happened. And I'll say what happened to me. So but yeah. So that's a long answer to a difficult question, but yeah, it's been a long journey.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I know um, so much of what you shared resonates with me. I know it will resonate with a lot of people who are watching this. So thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and sharing that. I know it's definitely difficult, and I'm sorry that you experienced that.
Yeah, I'm sorry too, but
Yeah. So how old were you when
we're
you?
good. We're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good. We're good, right? We're here. We're here.
Yeah.
Um, so how old were you when you first disclosed, and kind of what was sort of the catalyst that made you want to disclose?
I was 36 years old. All right. And 36 and a half to be uh, precise. And I I told my wife. My wife is she's the love of my life, and I had met her in fifth grade. She's my classmate, and we dated in seventh and eighth grade, and then we didn't talk to one another until our junior year of high school, and then we got back together our senior year, and I've been with her ever since. And um, so why at the age of 36? The answer is I always needed to tell somebody. I think I probably um, put it all aside when I was in college. It was just one of those times where it was a new experience for me, and there was studying and partying, and then law school, which was nothing but studying, and I just needed to get through it. And then I moved back here, and I started really thinking about it, and that drive by that house every day, and it was just weighing on me. And even then, so I still waited 11 years. And I've said it before that the night that I told, I had tried 200 previous times to tell her. I could never utter those words that I was sexually abused. I just couldn't do it. And I didn't know why. I'm like, oh my God, it's so simple. And I see these little kids that come into my office all day long, and they say, this is what this man did to me, or this is what my dad did to me, or this is what, so and so did to me. And I just could not get myself to say those words. And but I knew it had to be her that I had to tell because she was my partner in life. And so I got to a point where um, I just couldn't live with it. And I was hating myself and feeling like I had caused it and I had done it. And I was an active participant in it. And, I just kept saying, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And I had just had, or we had just had our daughter. I think having that child come into our world, and now I'm worried about being able to protect her. And my wife, I mean, she had no idea when I sat down and told her that night. She had no idea what I was going to tell her, and I was hoping for this huge amount of relief, and unfortunately, it didn't happen for me. I've said forever I was going to write a book. I've tried several times and I just haven't done it. But I did write for you guys, and that made me really feel good. But uh, I really think that if I write a book, it's going to be called "She Didn't Know." And and what I mean by that is not that she didn't know that it had happened to me, but she didn't know how to handle it. I mean, you gotta think about this. You got a 36-year-old woman, so she's still young, and she has no experience with sexual assault or child sexual abuse. She has just had this child, and she's got all these things that are on her mind. She's got a job and everything, and her husband cries in her lap one night and says he was sexually assaulted as a kid. And I really did. I thought that she would just grab a hold of me and say, "You're going to be okay. We're going to fix this." And she didn't. And again, she didn't know. I mean, I don't know why I expected her to know. I mean, my God, there are books written about it all the time about, spouses of people that have been sexually abused. And so she just dropped it and I dropped it. And about 3 years later, I started crumbling. And I mean, I really was crumbling. And it just, even though I came to work every day and I was able to still function here, my mind couldn't get away from that sexual abuse, and it was affecting me in every way possible. And I'm like, oh my God. And my wife and I had significant troubles. And so we talked and I talked and we talked and we talked for hours and hours and through the night. And it was, I just told her I needed so much more back then and I need it now. And she was wonderful. She saved our marriage. She went and, first off, she said, "You need to go see a therapist." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." And then my mother, I told her, and she said the same thing. She said, "You need to go see a therapist." I said, "Tell you what, Mom, you call the therapist, you set it up, and maybe I'll show up." And I'll be darned. She called and I went. And it was like the greatest relief I had ever had to be able to walk in and talk to somebody and say, "This is what's been on my chest forever." I mean, I can truly say, and not that the therapist asked these questions, but with my wife, I wanted her to ask those questions. I wanted her to ask me, what happened? How many times did it happen? Where did it happen? What kind of things did you guys do? And I wanted somebody to probe and ask me these questions. And when I got to my therapist, there was no judgment. With her, there was going to be this judgment, I thought. With my therapist, there was no judgment. I mean, it was the single greatest thing that had happened for me in that journey. And I just can't even explain. I mean, I used to laugh when people said, "Oh, you should go see a counselor." And I'm like, "Counselor?" I'm like, what are they going to ask me or tell me? "Oh, you hate your mother. Oh, do you hate your father?" I kept thinking, and I referred victims to therapists all the time, but it was not me. It was not the cool thing to do. And now I do it all the time, refer people to it all the time. And I can really say, you'll get something out of this. And so, I I did that, and it really just started opening up the door for me, and it gave me it really gave me some new hope. I mean, it really did, because I was at a point where I had suicidal ideations. I mean, and here I am, the chief law enforcement agent for an entire county, and respected by my peers throughout the state of New York, and I'm sitting there thinking, I just want to be dead. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrible.
Well, I'm grateful that you listen to your mom, or that you went with
me,
the
me too.
therapist that she called on your behalf.
Me
That's
too. Me
wonderful.
too.
Yeah, yeah. And it is a huge step. I mean, when you think, especially like, the generation that you're raised in, and probably also being a man, it's like, I don't need counseling. That's not something I need.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but yeah,
and that you mentioned that, and it was, that was one of the other hard parts about it. I mean, as you get older and you think, okay, well, I was a boy. Why did that boy want to do something to another boy? It certainly wasn't how was raised, and I didn't have any inclination that I was attracted to boys or anything like that. And so you just think about it, and I mean, obviously over the years, this has become the acknowledgement of this problem has become more and more prevalent. And I've always looked at it and said, it's horrible. Obviously, it's a horrible experience, whether you're male, female, or child. But the male on male thing definitely, I think, took a back seat. That it even when the girls and the women started coming out with this, it was still kind of that dirty little secret if it happened to a boy. And so that's part of one. It's part of why I've gone out there and started speaking, and over the years I've been speaking to agencies, because I just want everybody to understand that it does happen to boys too. It happens to men. And so that was one of the things that was difficult for me going through it. And I again, I was this smart kid in school, and I was an athlete. And somebody said, well, did you ever think about talking to any of your friends about it? I'm like, oh my God, they would have they would have laughed me out of the school if I told them what I was doing to that boy or doing with that boy. It would have been horrible for me. And the funny thing is when I opened up the Justice Center, which I hope we can talk about, um, the newspaper reporter, I told a little bit of the story. The newspaper reporter sent or asked me if he could have a copy of my speech, and I sent it to him, and he published it word for word. And one of those boys, one of my friends from then, uh, called me or texted me and said, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. You know, and I know today I could tell all of them this is what happened to me, and they would all be great with it. But back then, it was like the most embarrassing thing, and it's just so strange for me to have that feeling.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, so with your experience as a survivor, but also working as a district attorney and working to prosecute child abuse cases, like before you disclosed or even after you disclosed your own abuse, what was it like for you to work cases where you're interacting with child victims and their families, and kind of having to shepherd them through the process?
So before I had disclosed, um, I can honestly say it was the hardest thing that I could possibly do, and it would eat me up, and I couldn't I couldn't distance myself, and I would be sitting there interviewing the child in my office, and my mind would go to what happened to me, and that's it's very difficult to be effective when your mind is wandering away from what that child is trying to tell you and what you need to be telling that child. It makes it difficult. Now I would catch myself doing it, but it happened all the time for me. So, one of the things that was so troubling to me was that I couldn't let that child know that he wasn't alone, or that he wouldn't be alone as he went through life. I really couldn't do that since I disclosed, and since I've started really opening up to people. I've been more open with child victims, and I know there are some prosecutors out there that say you shouldn't tell them about your personal life, but I do what I have to do in order to get that child to be able to tell his or her story. And sometimes they need to hear something, because you look at me, I'm a an older guy. I wear a suit and tie. These kids are coming in from sometimes broken homes, and they're scared of me. And so, sometimes you tell them a story, and they can tell you a story. And when they know they're not alone, I think it makes it easier. So if there's a prosecutor out there that says never tell them anything that's happened to you or about you, and I don't go into detail or anything like that. I just let them know that they're not alone, and it helps. It makes them feel more comfortable with me, and then I can walk them into the courtroom, and I can tell them, don't look over there. I said, there's only going to be one time when you have to look over there. I'm going to ask you one time to say who did this to you, and you point to him. I said, every other time you look at me. When the defense attorney is asking you questions, don't look over there. Look at him or look at that jury. And so it has helped me in that, in that mode. But, you know, the worst thing about it for me was that I'm sitting there talking with these beautiful kids, and they could tell. They had the ability to tell. I was awed by the fact that they could tell, that they did tell, that they did what they were supposed to do. And here I am, this 30-plus-year-old guy, and I can't tell. I mean, I couldn't even tell my wife, my life partner, my best friend, and they're telling a counselor at school, they're telling a parent. And for me, it just kept wearing me down, that I had that inability to tell. But I can honestly say that seeing them tell helped me in the end to be able to tell. I mean, so I really did learn from these children that I was representing in a courtroom. And it didn't make it easy, because it was the hardest thing I ever did, but it helped me to be able to do it.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I love the fact that you are able to share in an appropriate way with child victims that they're not alone, that have been through something similar. And I would think that not only does that help them to not feel alone, but also, I mean, they may look up to you and think, wow, this happened to me, but like when I'm older, I can become a successful attorney. Like this experience doesn't have to ruin my life. It doesn't mean that I'm broken, that I'm stupid, that I'm not able to accomplish things and be who I want to be. So I think
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I'm hopeful that's one of the things that they take away, because I mean, we know so frequently, not just kids, but adults who have been sexually assaulted, they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they try to bury this stuff. And they have mental health issues, and there's just so many things that can go wrong. But there are so many of us, like yourself, like me, that have actually made it. It's so hard, but we've actually been able to make it. And I think we can be role models for those people that think that they can. And I know I have somebody very close right now that thinks they can. And that's all I keep trying to tell her is, you can, you can, you can, because it's so difficult to overcome this, but everybody can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I definitely want to hear about and to give you a chance to talk about developing the Justice Center of the Southern Tier. First of all, what is it? What happens there? And how were you able to create this?
So my Justice Center, and it obviously is bigger than me, but it was my brainchild, and it started with, I mean, first off, there's a the Bavona Center in Rochester, and it's a huge center for child victims, um, and I had gone to a conference there, and I thought, wow, this is kind of what I want to do, but it's not exactly what I want to do. It's kind of like what I want to do. And, I had gone over to our sheriff's department where the investigators and the police officers would interview victims. And it would be, I guess the only thing that I could say is they would interview the victims in the same place that they would interview the suspects. Okay. And there was literally a bull ring. I don't know if you know what a bull ring is, but a bull ring is where they hook a handcuff and then hook it to the wall. So the victim would sit in the chair right next to the bull ring. And there was a high desk where the police officer was on the other side of it, couldn't even see what the person was saying. They could hear what they were saying. So they would conduct this interview of a witness or a victim and not even be able to see the person. I said, this is just so bad. This is so wrong. We have to do something that can change the way that we work and treat victims, work with and treat victims. So I had this idea in my head. I've had it in my head for a long time. And it just so happened that there was a new grant cycle from the Office of Victim Services and through the VOCA funds through the federal government. And I really didn't have time to do it at the time. It was 4 years ago we applied. And I said, but it's now or never. I need to do this. So I started working on it. And the concept was very simple. We wanted to bring all the services to the victims in one safe, very comfortable setting, different than an office space, which is hard to do because, you have to have office space. So my goal was to make the office space something different. And in my mind, it had the greenery, the plants, it had flowing water, it had beautiful pictures, it had comfortable chairs and everything that we could do. And I would like to tell you that I came up with everything that's in there. I did not. I came up with one thing, which I'll tell you about. But the women that we hired, they went and my office staff, they bought all this stuff. I told them what I wanted, and I said, you guys figure out how you do it. But ultimately, like, we brought in comfortable sofas. So nobody's sitting in an office chair there. We brought in comfortable sofas, all these plants, and I had to have a flowing waterfall. And by the way, this center is in a town called Montour Falls, which the backdrop is this huge waterfall. And I wanted a waterfall on the wall inside that you could hear the water trickling down. In the state of New York said, we're never going to pay for that, Joe. And I said, you are going to pay for that. And I'm going to tell you why. And they said, all right, give us your pitch right now. And I said, so I was crumbling in my own life. I was crumbling and I was trying to build the pieces back up. And I built a wall, and I built it out of rocks that I dragged out of the lake. I live on Seneca Lake, and I built it out of rocks that I dragged out of that lake by myself. And it is in some places 30 feet long, and it is 15 feet high. And some of the rocks are 100-pound rocks. And I put every single one of those rocks up there by myself. I built it from the bottom up, and some of them I just rolled and flipped and rolled and flipped. And I said, and the entire time that I did that, I would hear the waves crashing behind me and the water, or the water trickling in. I said, it took me 2 years to build that. It was therapy for me. And there is such a thing as water therapy, and you can pay for water therapy. And they said, order it. And it's on the wall in the Justice Center. So the first thing you see when you come in is beautiful plants and comfy couch and coffee table that's beautiful. Like it's just, you have to come see it because it's just beautiful. And what I wanted was the victim to walk through that door and go, somebody believes in me. And one of the things that we have as soon as you walk in is the sign that says just breathe. And that is the concept behind it. So they come there. The first thing that we established was we want our police to interview the victims there. All right, the survivors there. So we created an office space for the police. So they had access to all the computer software and everything that they needed to come in and do an interview in this beautiful room with soft lighting, beautiful sofa, beautiful lights, pictures on the wall, flowers or plants on the wall. I mean, so that person could come in at 1 o'clock in the morning when she's just fled from her home with a bag and her child and be able to tell her story. And so the police have that and they have access to that. My office, we meet with victims, survivors in the Justice Center. All right. Not in this conference room that I'm in here today with file boxes all over the place and, conference room table. And we don't do it here anymore. We do it at the center. So now the survivor gets referred there, or victim. And by the way, it's victims of every crime. It's not just domestic violence. It's not just sexual assault. It is any crime that you are a victim of. And we extend it out to family members of victims. So, for example, in my mind, in the child sexual assault case, that's the victim is not just that child. It is frequently the mother and the father. And we give them the service as well because they are saying, this happened to I let this happen to my child. And the answer is no, they didn't. Just like it wasn't the child's fault, it's not their fault. So we provide the services to them. We have an on-site therapist that literally goes Tuesdays and Thursdays all day long. We'll meet with clients after hours. We'll do the telehealth thing if they have to. We have group therapy there. I mean, it is amazing. We have a case manager that oversees all of this. And we don't do it just for Schuyler County. We do it for the entire Southern Tier. I've had people come from Chemung County, Tompkins County, Steuben County, Yates County. I mean, all over the Southern Tier. And it took us a while to open our doors up. There were some very significant headaches, and it was local government, county government, getting the money. That was actually not that hard, but getting the county to go along with what I wanted to do. And they're like, oh, we love your idea, but we're not going to hire anybody to work there. You figure out, get somebody to contract with. Getting the right contractor took me over a year to do. But we finally opened up the doors really for good. In January of last year, we had our grand opening ceremony in May, and I was able to tell my story for the first time in my own community. And I think it really opened up the eyes, because I mean, let's face it, people look at me and they say, "Wow, this guy's got the world by the tail. He's a lawyer. He's the district attorney. He lives on the lake," and nobody could ever look at me and say, "Wow, that's messed up." That he has issues just like everybody else does. So it was the first time that I had told my story in my community, and it was, I just did it, and I did it with my parents there, and they had no idea that I was going to do it. And I had the mother of a beautiful young girl that had been murdered in my county, and she sat there. She was sitting next to my mother, and she could tell my mother was upset. And she said, "You didn't know that he was going to do that, did you?" And she said, "No." But she came in later on and she just grabbed a hold of me and she said, "I just want you to know I love you." So we've had over 350 victims in the first year that we provided services to. So it's, it really has been, a really, really good thing. And it's just going. it's just going great.
Wow. What what an incredible gift that you have given to these victims, that they have a safe and welcoming, nurturing place that they can come to. And I just listening to you talk about that, I think about like your tenacity, like, willing to like just bulldoze through the challenges, the roadblocks that inevitably come up when you try to develop something like this. But I also think too just about your experience as a survivor. I mean, not only has your work as a district attorney made a difference in the lives of other victims, but this is like a legacy. The center is like a legacy that you're, gonna leave when you're done with your career. That you experienced something terrible in your life, but um, use that as a catalyst to make the life of other victims, a little easier. And that's just beautiful. It's
I
beautiful.
I'm so proud of this, and again, it wasn't just me. It was our partners Pathway. It was Family Services of Chemung County, and my office staff was just spectacular, and everybody put their heart and soul into this place, and it's working. I love it. And when I do ultimately retire, I will spend a lot of time there trying to build it and grow it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I know you mentioned earlier, and I completely agree that healing is a lifelong endeavor. It's never just a one and done thing. It's a daily thing throughout your life. But just in terms of your healing process and the trajectory of your career, and just as you get older and wiser, right? Wisdom has to come with age, right? Something good has to
Right.
come with age. Um, what do you see in your career, just in the criminal justice process or just working with victims of crime? What are some things that you wish you could change about the process?
There are a few things.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, I think that the perception of what children or any sexual assault victims should remember needs to be changed. All right. I mean, I can tell you as an adult who's worked in this justice system my entire career that I could not possibly tell you an exact date of when something happened to me. I can't possibly tell you what time it happened or what room it happened in. What I know is it happened every time. What that child knows is it happened to them. All right. Describe what he was wearing. Describe what he smelled like. Describe the setting. I mean, I know, and I've talked with experts about that. That is not where a child's head goes or mind goes when they are being sexually assaulted. It is not where a rape victim's mind goes. They may be able to tell you about the checkered pattern on the wall or a picture on the wall, but they're not going to be able to tell you this is the date. But we demand that of these children in a courtroom, and it's just unfair because they can't they can't do it. I mean, if you're lucky enough that it only happened one time or two times, maybe they can give you some details. But we expect that every child, every sexual assault victim is going to be able to tell us this is what the guy was wearing, this is exactly what he said, and this is the time and the date that it happened. And it just doesn't work like that. So that's one thing. Um, the second thing, and this is a no brainer to me, I understand why they have kept it out of the justice system, but juries need to be able to know when this suspect has done this before. They just do. They just do. I
Yeah.
tried a case last year, hung jury, and the guy had sexually assaulted two other kids, both step kids. This was another step kid, but assaulted them when they were young. He's now an adult. The victim's now an adult, and the jury hung on it. And then I talked to them afterwards, and I said, "What would you have thought if I told you that he had done this before?" And they said, "Guilty, guilty."
Yeah.
I mean, and you don't want to convict somebody based upon what they did in the past, but these crimes are different. And we know that if you did it once, you're likely to have done it a second time. So that's huge. Third thing for me is the ability to use closed circuit television for all testimony, and it shouldn't just be testimony of children. It should be testimony of domestic violence victims, rape victims, anybody that has to sit in a courtroom and say that guy did this to me. I would change all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Right. Amen to all of that. Oh my goodness. Yes. Uh, so one of the things I'm passionate about, and you probably are too, as a survivor who also works with other victims and survivors, what advice do you have just based on your experience navigating this with your own personal history? What advice would you have for others who are working in this profession who are also survivors in terms of how, surviving your career and taking care of yourself?
It is so difficult, and you get personally vested in the children that you are working with or the survivors that you are working with. It is so difficult to distance yourself, and for some of us it's impossible. So for me, I have figured out that I just need decompression time. Okay. And it's not just when I work with somebody, but I mean, this is mentally draining. It would be mentally draining if you were not a survivor. So when you look at it that way, you got the double whammy. It's mentally draining anyway, and you have this special connection. So for me, I look at it and say, all right, I need some decompression time. All right. And like, for example, today, this is not easy for me to do, although I'm getting, it's getting easier for me, but it's not easy for me to do. So I'm going to go home after this and I'm going to just chill out by myself for a little bit and get myself into a good frame of mind. It's very much the same for all of my triggers or like some places they call them activation cues. But for me, uh, for my triggers, it happens. I will, my wife will wake up in the morning at 6 o'clock and say, don't go out to lunch today. And I know that means she knows he's going to be in town. Right. And we have somebody that tells us when he's going to be in town. And so, something like that, it's like, oh my God, I'm like in a panic for the entire weekend. And until I know he's gone, and then I'm okay. So what do? I go home and I decompress and I do something that's good for me, that's healthy for me. So it may be, you know, getting some exercise. It could be anything, but the problem that we have is that we all are personally invested in our clientele, and it makes it difficult to distance. But we have to do that. We have to set these boundaries. And I remember my wife used to say, "What did you talk about at therapy?" Like, my therapist told me, "I don't have to tell you." So I mean, that's the we have to set our boundaries, and we have to look out for ourselves, because we can't be effective if we're falling apart because of who we're dealing with.
Yeah, and being willing to accept the fact that we deserve to unplug and not think about cases, not think about our own trauma, to have fun, to experience joy. Like
It's
it
okay, right?
yeah,
It's okay. It's
yeah,
okay. You don't have to feel bad.
yeah,
All right. I mean, it happened. It's over. You are overcoming it. You have the right to feel good and to be happy.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, that feels like a great segue to my last question, and then of course you can share anything else that you would like
Okay.
to. But um, anybody could be watching this who maybe they've never disclosed their past abuse, or maybe they have. Maybe they're struggling in one way or another. Maybe it's somebody who works in victim services and they just want to hear from somebody who also does the work. But what would you tell someone who is watching this right now who is a survivor? What do you think is the most important thing for our fellow survivors to know?
Well, I think that, whether somebody chooses to disclose is clearly up to them, and when if they choose to, when they do it, how they do it is totally up to them. And there's well, if they don't ever disclose, that's also okay. It doesn't mean that you can't move forward with your life. And what I have found is that the disclosure that I made initially, it didn't work for me. But the more that I was forced into doing something that I didn't want to do, the therapy, and I say forced, I wasn't forced, but to save my marriage, to save my life, I had to do it. And so for me, I just look at it and say, if you don't trust therapy, then you should at least give it a chance. And not every therapist is built to do this type of work. And it may take you 3 or 4 therapists, but keep going, keep trying to get one that does fit for you. I was very lucky because my therapist, we clicked right away, and she helped me more than you could ever imagine. I did 5 years, at least one day a week, sometimes 2 or 3 of therapy. And I can't even begin to tell you how much it helped me. The second thing is, um, you just have to understand that you're not alone. And for me, one of the greatest parts of my healing was through the advocacy center in Ithaca, New York. And my therapist put me in touch with it, but it was group therapy, and it was for men and women. And I walked in and I sat down, and I was so nervous. And I thought, oh my God, here I am. I'm 30 or almost 40 years old, and I'm the district attorney, and I'm terrified to be in this room right now. And we introduced ourselves, and they asked a question, and somebody started talking, and I said, oh my God, I'm not alone. These people have feelings just like I have feelings. What races through my head every day is racing through their head every day. And I mean, it was one of the most amazing things that ever happened for me, was to sit there with a group of people. And it has helped me to talk about it. It's helped me to open up. It's made it so that I can do this in public, and I can stand before large audiences and say, this is what happened to me, and look at, I've survived. So that's all part of it. Lastly, I stand by the moniker at our Justice Center, which is just breathe. All right, just breathe and look at the whole picture, and understand that you're not alone, because this has happened to so many people, and you didn't do anything wrong. And I don't care if it was a sexual assault because the woman was intoxicated and the guy did it. The guy still did it. Right. So for me, there's never any blame on that survivor. Never. So those are the things that I think that I would, if I had somebody sitting right here in my office today, that was just disclosing, I would say those things.
Amazing, beautiful. I mean, if only every survivor could hear those things
I'm hoping they can.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Share this recording and then they'll hear it.
Very good.
um, so I know I've asked you a lot of questions, and you've been so gracious in sharing of yourself. Is there anything else you want to share that I haven't asked you about?
you know, I guess the only thing that I would say is that there are so many people out there that this has happened to. This is an epidemic, and at some point, I mean, I don't think you're ever going to end child abuse or sexual abuse, or anything like that. We're never going to fix that problem. But what we can do is we can make it known to the people that it happens to that it's okay, to tell that, and we have to educate these parents at an early age to get them to understand that there is no stereotypical victim, there is no stereotypical suspect or defendant, perpetrator. All right. It could be your son's doctor. It could be the gymnastics coach at college. It can be the guy that you share your bed with. It can be anyone. There's no stereotypical abuser. And parents need to understand that, because parents by nature usually tend to believe that if I know that person, they're not going to do it to my child. All right. And, oh, he's a nice guy. Well, I can tell you what, there's a lot of nice guys that sexually assault people. So, for me, we're not going to end it, but we have to educate them, and we have to educate those children. And I know there are a lot of schools where they don't want to talk about sex education. And I'm sorry, when they do want to talk about it, it's eighth grade. It's too damn late. Yeah. We need to start having these conversations with these kids when they are or second grade and third graders. They need to understand that this stuff happens, and they need to tell immediately.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Knowledge is power, and young children should be able to know that their body belongs to them, and that it shouldn't be violated by anyone. They deserve to know that. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And the last thing that I want to say is, again, I just want to thank you for what you're doing for survivors. It's very, very difficult work, but it is amazing work. And I'm proud to have come into contact with you, and will call you my friend, because I think you're doing such an amazing thing.
Oh, thank you so much. And the feeling is mutual. And I will say that this has been the honor of my career to work on this project. I mean, I've worked with victims and survivors as an advocate for many, many, many years, but to work alongside survivors who just want to share their hard-earned wisdom and healing and insights with other survivors, to just be able to facilitate that happening is just an incredible honor, because I get to meet people like you. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your journey with folks who are watching this. And you also wrote, you mentioned this earlier, you wrote just an incredibly powerful written piece for Survivor Space that I will include in the description for this recording, so folks can check that out too. It's just incredibly moving.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for chatting with me, for sharing of yourself, and just for all that you have done in your life and your career. I mean, I wish I could clone you.
my wife might disagree. She'd probably say one is enough.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do, all that you've done for victims and survivors, and just for being who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.